Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and we've got quite a chunky video for y'all today. There were 4 large One Piece regionals for the English version of the card game that happened this past weekend. 2 online with the core TCG, as well as the No Hero one, and then there are 2 in person with the Madrid regionals, as well as the Brazil regional. So a lot of events, and for each one of these regions too, this is the first OP08 event since release of the set. So not only a lot of events, but also beginning of format events too, which I think is really interesting. So we're going to go over as much as we can for all 4 of these in kind of one video, just because I didn't want to make separate for each one of these 4. And if you guys want any of the deck lists or any of the data that we're going over, they're going to be on my website, Eggman Events, which is linked in the description. We have all of these events and many other that have already happened around the world for this format, and we're going to continue our best to keep this updated as well as we get more as this month continues. But of this too, I do want to mention for the core TCG event, myself and Russell were able to do the live stream for it, so I really do appreciate Core for letting us do that. If you guys want to check it out, you can find it linked in the description. It's currently free to watch, so you can watch all 10 rounds that we did. I also just want to thank Russell for being able to just do it with me. It was a lot of fun, and it was a long day, but it was a fun day, and I really do appreciate the opportunity as well. So make sure to check that out if you guys want to see some of the matches. This is for the 2 online events, though, in particular. They're both essentially 10-24 caps with 10 rounds of Swiss, best of 1. So that was for the core and the No Heroes event. And then for the Madrid regionals, this was in person, but a 2-day event. So this was 9 rounds of Swiss and a 5-12 player cap into a top 16 best of 3, which they played out on the second day. And then for Brazil, it was a 256 player cap, and this was 8 rounds of Swiss, only 1 day. So that's kind of the breakdown for all of these as well. And normally I kind of go over the leader breakdowns, but since this is, all 4 events, I did make a quick just combined pie chart. So across all 4 events, so top 32s for both of the online events and then top 16 for the both in-person events, we did have 22 Rob Luccis, with 2 of them winning 2 of the events. We did have Star Deck 13 Luffy with 21 copies, with 1 of those winning the event. 15 copies of both the Star Deck 14 Luffy as well as the OP07 Bonney. We had 9 copies of Nami, 4 copies of the OP05 Purple Luffy, with 1 of them winning the Brazil event, 4 copies of Zoro, 3 copies of Reiju, and then singletons of Moria, Dofi, as well as Kalgara. So across this weekend, we did have 11 different leaders top, which I think is a good amount of variety. I'm not going to say that this is the most diverse format that we've had in this card game, and I also will say that it is a little bit stale in the opinion of not, there's a lot of different leaders that are viable right now, as you guys can see, but there's nothing really that's changed from the end of OP07 to the beginning of OP08, right? Like Zoro got like the animal package, and there's like some new cards that both like Star Deck 14 Luffy and Lucci added to their decks in particular, but we're not going to see a lot of change until the starter decks at the end of this month. And because of that too, I don't think they're going to make any restriction changes or anything like that, because this is kind of like a 1 month format that we have until the end of October, and then once we get into November, we have another new format with the star decks release. So it's a little bit of a weird one too, because it is so short, but we do have these regional invites on the line, which are really important. So we definitely have people grinding this out and trying to get their wins with it too, which a good amount of people did based off these results too. So that's kind of like the overhead for it. There's just a lot going on for it. I do think, like, obviously a lot of people have been talking about how black, and more specifically the 8-drop Moria, is the best deck in the game, or decks that can take advantage of that. And that is true in the fact that it is, over 50% of the decks that topped this weekend in general were running the card. But I also think like Black Yo Luffy's playing it differently, but I also will say that like Lucci and Star Deck 14 Luffy was about 50% of it too. So I don't think that there's going to be any changes for that. Maybe something going into OP09, but I definitely see a lot of people talking about this in particular in general too. And then last thing I'll say before we go into the deck list is that going into this weekend on Thursday, I made a video and I made an updated tier list. And in that video, I said I thought the best 5 decks in the format were Lucci, both Luffy's, the Bonney, and the Nami, which ended up just being the highest amount of topping leaders, which I think is interesting. And then I put Luffy, Zoro, and the Reiju as like a 1.5. So I think that's been pretty close to what I've been thinking. So nothing too surprising for me based on these win rates and on these ratios of people who are topping with these leaders. So generally what I'm seeing, but I do think there is, there's some diversity. Again, not the most diverse format that we've been in, but I definitely prefer something like this compared to having something with red, purple law legal like we've seen in Japan for their version of OP08 and it taking over 50% of the format by itself. So anyways, that's just my overhead for that. You guys can look at the data if you guys want as well, but I'm going to do my best to go over a variety of deck lists. Again, we have 11 different leaders that topped with this. We're going to go over each one of the winning deck lists and then a couple of hand-picked versions of just the different leaders that top. So I'm not going to go through every one of them. Again, there's 96 different people who top these events, and I just want to say personally congratulations to all 96 people. Any of the picks I'm going to explain why, but I also don't want to think that anyone's getting snubbed or anything like that. These are just going over as efficiently as possible, and I do want to say sincerely congratulations to everyone who are able to top their respective events as well. But jumping on into it, we're going to go to our first place list. We're going to start off with two of the Rob Luccis. So this is both Holden's version of it, our FlyestRavens, as well as Ruar's version of it. So they're both the winners of the core TCG as well as the No Hero online events respectively. And even though Rob Lucci is like a known deck, it was it came out in OP07. It's been relevant since then. It only got more cards to play with in OP08 after Enies Lobby getting hit, and we're able to take advantage of one of the best cards in the game right now, which is Jack. Which this gets so much value. The fact that this is able to consistently get board clear, especially since you can get rid of a 4K with using the Rob Lucci leader effect as well. I think it's been a really big boon for this deck. Especially even if we did lose the Lobby. But I also want to say that there's a good amount of difference between these two. There's a good amount of tech, like most of the decks that exist right now, there's enough tech options that even though the card pool is pretty known, you can still see the individual changes between the decks. And it's not something like, I think like by the end of like OP05 Sakazuki's reign, we knew what the decks looked like, right? You had the decision if you're playing like the Navy build, like the stage build or not. But other than that, you pretty much knew like 49, 50 cards of most builds that existed. Like there are so many times where I had duplicate versions of the same Sakazuki list in the same event. And I don't feel like that's kind of happening as much for this format. Even with Rob Lucci, there's a lot of decisions that people are making, and there are like some individual choices and changes, which even if Rob Lucci is the best leader and the most popular in the game, it is cool to see that people are making those little changes. So for Holden's version of it, I would say this is pretty close to like the most standard version I can think of this. A lot of 4-ofs, right? We do play the Spandam. We do play the Helmeppo. No copies of the Suru, which I think is really interesting. I think a lot of people like default add the Suru, but we do have, access to more 2Ks with the Who's Who, which came out in OP08 and is a Cypher Pool card, a former Cypher Pool, which means you can still find it with Spandam. We also have like Khalifa as well. And we're only playing those 8 2Ks, so not really prioritizing using those, which is interesting. We're playing the Kuzan, which I think has been more popular in most black decks because it's been hard to remove early, especially with red purple lock on, and that's been a good add. And then the top end Jack, Moria, and then Isho as well. And I will say too, like 4 copies of Tempest Kick and Ice Age, the removal feels really good still. Like even if we don't have Enies Lobby, like Ice Age with Jack just gets rid of so many cards, like an 8 or less, which obviously 8 costs are really important in this game. I also do want to look at Ruar's build too, and I really do like the addition of the 9-drop Kaido, right? We're only playing 1 copy of it, so it's more of a tech choice than anything else, but this does get you some good positions sometimes. The fact that you're 9-drop 9K is a pretty good stat line, and it gets around Sabo protection too, which I think is really important. But we do see like a quote-unquote more standard in the sense we're playing Suru. We're only playing 2 copies of the Kuzan, and we have like the Spice ad of the Hina as well. But you'll see that most people are playing 4 copies of Ice Age and Tempest Kick. Pretty much, better Great Eruption in the deck too. But we know what black looks like right now. We know what Rob Lucci looks like in theory, but you can still see that there's a good amount of variety depending on personal choices. So again, we do have the first place list again. So this is FlyestRavens, this is Ruar's. Congratulations to both players for winning their respective regionals. And then moving on, we do have the winner from Madrid. This is Alessio's version of the Stardeck 13 Luffy. And there are a good amount of like Luffy, I think, is a little bit more homogenized on their deck list, but there is still some decisions with it. In this build particular, we do have 2 copies of Borsalino, which I know a lot of people have in theory adding this to their deck. It's a good amount of value. Like obviously, like if you're going second, Kuzan's like the best card on curve, but like Borsalino's not too terrible either. We do have the Sabo, not only the 5-drop black one, but also 2 copies of the 4-drop, or the yellow one from the starter deck, which I've been seeing this one pop up more often as well. And then we do have the Ice Age and the Three Brothers Bond. So a little bit of adaptation to what the kind of the metagame looks like. This being able to get rid of a 5 or less and get a card out of your life is good. I know people are still bouncing between the Sabo and the Finger Pistol. And again, it's like personal choices too. Like, again, you know what the shell looks like, but you do have the room for a lot of these individual choices for what you think the deck's going to look like. But I will say, like, between Rob, Lucci, and Luffy, Luffy is a lot more locked into having to run so much of the archetype. So last thing I'll say is that I've been not seeing a lot of people running the ace anymore, generally finding more room for what they want for tech choices for, again, like Ice Age, Borsalino, Sabo, right? The 5-cost yellow one. Those need spaces in the deck because we're such a tight 50 as it is. So that just means it's a little bit tougher for you to run the ace package. So not much more to say. Congratulations to Alessio for their finish with the black yellow Luffy. And then lastly, for the Brazil, this is Jorge's version of the Monkey.D.Luffy. And this is definitely a deck that I always have a hard time respecting. And then I just get whomped by it a lot of the time. And I will be doing some testing with this on my live stream today as this video comes out. So I'll probably have a different change of opinion in the next 24 hours of this releasing. But it's been doing pretty good. We do have a new starter deck for Purple Luffy. So a lot of people are getting support. And I do wonder if people aren't playing this deck as much as they would be because they know that it's going to get better at the end of the month. I've seen kind of the same effect with Blue Dofi, though I will say that I think Purple Luffy's better right now than Blue Dofi is right now. But both are moderately viable, and we'll talk about a Blue Dofi later today. But generally, I think the best add for this deck is the addition of the 9-drop Linlin. This is from OP08. The fact that we just have another boss monster, and this one being able to be kind of a more defensive version. Kaido obviously being a very aggressive version, right? This is something you kind of wanted to find on curve every time, but it's pretty tricky when you don't have any like actual searchers for this card. Big Mom just being a alternative card, the fact that this can get rid of Sabos on the board, or anything else, like against Black Yellow Luffy, being able to put a sticky card into their life that they're going to have a hard time getting rid of, actually comes up quite a bit. And they heal too. So you're so aggressive with taking your life in some matchups that being able to get that emergency heal, buy yourself another turn in some scenarios. I think this is a really good add for the deck and has been very helpful. So other than that, it's kind of the same package that we've seen since release of this leader. A bunch of 4-drops, a bunch of 5-drops. We do have the Poly, obviously been good since release for it. We have our blockers of the Kid, Queen, and now the new Sanji from OP07. And then we have Magellan, which this card still gets some really good warping matchups for you. I think like decks like Black Yellow Luffy who want to get to 10 Dawn as quick as they can, and others that kind of try to do the same thing. Magellan can just ruin their day and make it difficult for them to play the curve that they really wanted to do. So I think that's been a good add, and it can really warp a lot of matchups for you too. But this is Purple Luffy. I'm just definitely going to test out this deck firsthand. I'm probably going to make some changes based on my own experience, but it's been really cool to see it's still relevant right now, and then even before the big boost of support is going to get at the end of the month. But this is Jorge's build, and congratulations for winning the Brazil regionals with Monkey.D.Luffy. All right, jumping into our X1s and lower, we do have Nami. So this is Alejandro's version of it. This is the runner-up for Madrid. So this was in the finals for that tournament, since it was a top 16 best of 3 single limb day 2 for them. Nami's been pretty good, generically, right? I think since OP07, it's gotten a resurgence of popularity, especially with Red Purple Law out of this format. It was its worst matchup by far. Not only were you quick and aggressive, but the fact that you could bottom deck and put cards back into the deck so your deck is larger. It was a really, really tough call for Nami to exist in that format. So not only did we have like the end of OP07 with that getting banned, going into OP08 with not as many contenders for aggressive decks. I think like Purple Luffy, Zoro, and Kalgara, 3 decks that topped these events, are not very present to prevent Nami from being popular as well. So I will say Nami didn't top every event as well. We did have it in the core TCG event, but the No Heroes online regionals, no Nami in their top 32, and then we did have it for the rest of them. But it's interesting to see, like, even like I think like Star Deck 14 Luffy Luffy, Lucci, and Sardic 13 Luffy topped all of these events. But from there, we got like a lot of like mixed results for some of the rest of them. So for the Nami here, general package, what we've been seeing, the spice ad that I'd say is that we do have the ad of the Zeph. This is really good for the mirror match, is kind of the breaker for it. So your turn, when your opponent activates blocker or an event, if your leader has the East Blue type, you can trash 4 cards from the top of your deck. So it just means that if any time they're going to play an event card, you just get to mill more than they can ever hope for it. So it's better than Hanger in that way. So you don't see Hanger in this build particular, but obviously it's just like a mirror match breaker than anything else. So it's going to be interesting. I think Nami's going to be around for a while unless there's any changes from the restriction list. I'm not calling for it right now, but I don't like playing against it. And if there's any changes to it, it'd be more of like a customer satisfaction than a necessarily like restriction of it being too good. It's just going to be, I think, a present that's around that you're going to have to be really cognizant for. So this is, again, Alejandro's build, and congratulations for the runner-up for the Madrid Regionals. And the next up, we've got Stardeck 14 Luffy. So I chose Matias's version of it for this one. We do have like a couple different packages of Monkey.D.Luffy that we've seen around. I think when it first hit the scene back in September at the end of OP07, it was more leaning to like the Straw Hat version, which is kind of like what the deck was built for. We played the stage, we played more Straw Hat version of cards to be able to synchronize with your leader. Since then, I think more people have decided that the Navy build's the more consistent version of it. From my point of view, like brand new, being able to put cards in your trash is very valuable, since we don't have ways inherently off our leader, and most of our cards to put cards into our trash to make sure that we have a good Moria are plays like that too. Jack's been like a superb card for this deck. It's great in Lucci. It's super great for us, the fact that we become 11k for the rest of the game. This card's really infamously hard to remove in a lot of matchups because it's cost based and it's an 8k body, and if you play it on curve, you're in a really good spot for this deck too. So I don't really have much more to say. This is kind of like a different version of Lucci, where you are less like hard removal based, but you're more value based on playing bodies, which why I think this deck has a little bit of a better matchup into Black Yellow Luffy respectively. But in general, I think that the this has been a really cool deck to see viable when in Asia it wasn't very viable during this time of their meta. So I don't have a lot to say though. This one's, I think most people are playing like a similar version of this Navy build. I have seen some builds playing the 4-cost Laboon, so from EBO1. I think that's been a good add for the deck, is like a worse copy of Kuzan, but that's still fine. There's also some times when you could play it off the Moria and you get the effect immediately, then you can chain it with the Jack that you already have on board to get rid of a 7 or less. So I think that's good for the deck. I think that helps it as well. But in general, I think this deck is great. It's still going to be around, and congratulations to to Matias for their 3rd place finish. I believe it was a 3rd place finish, right? Was it a 3rd place finish? Oh boy. Oh geez, I jumped into 3rd place finish on the Brazil regionals with it. So congratulations there. All right, next up we've got Bonney, and I've actually got 2 versions of the deck to just kind of show off some different lines of thought. So for the core TCG regionals, we do have their Bandai TCG name is Min's Boyfriend, and then we also have Stefano as well with their copy of the Bonney. And I would say that Stefano's build is pretty similar to what I thought the deck should look like towards the beginning of the meta. We do have a copy, or 4 copies of Rosie here, and then to pair up with that, we do have 4 copies of the Cavendish, 4 copies of the Monkey.D.Luffy, and then 2 copies of Carrot. No copies of the 5-drop Bonney, which I think is still a really good card and can help skew some matchups, but this is kind of like, I like the idea. I think that there's enough 5 costs right now that are great, that being able to play an 8-drop that plays a 5-drop in Bonney when you're so tempo oriented can get you a lot of value in this game right now. So, and then obviously, if you guys don't know, there's kind of like a protection chain where Luffy can protect all your 3 costs or lowers. Rosie protects all your 5 costs, original costs. So if they try to reduce the cost of things to get things in the range of like Lucci or Jack, the Luffy will protect it if you have 3 or more bodies on the board, which is pretty easy if you play it off the Rosinante. So being able to get this tech for your Rob Lucci and your black matchups in general, I think is really good. So this is a version here though from Stefano, and then we have this other version here. So this is from again Min's Boyfriend here for the North American event, and the big thing I like to kind of signify in this one is there's a good amount of change between the 2 of these builds, right? We're playing 4 copies of the Bonney instead of the Carrot. We still play the Carrot, but it's the 5 cost from OP02. that just says at the end of your turn you get to set up to 1 Dawn is active. So it's kind of like another version of Urouge. So if you need to play a body out and get the Dawn open for your leader effect, you have that. We have the 4 Dofis instead of the 2 on the other side, and then 2 copies of Rosinante. But the other thing is that you'll see that there's no 9-drop Zoro in Min Boyfriend's version of it, which I've been really wanting to like this card, right? It's really great against Nami. It's really good against Black Yellow Luffy and a couple other matches. But when 50% of that pie chart is the black either Lucci or Luffy, they're going to have so many ways to remove this card that it's going to be like paying 9 Dawn for this card or have it stuck in your hand for the remainder of the game is just asking for a lot. I will say though, in this build particular, it does make a little bit more sense though, because we do have like protection. So if we're able to get Luffy and Rosinante on board and they stay on board, playing the Zoro means that you do get to play it and it's only like removed by like blue, or if they have like a, I guess, super spectacular turn. But being able to do that and get the protection off the Zoro is great. So I do think that's fine. You know, they could also play like Kaido and only make it a 7 or less, which means the Luffy doesn't protect it because it only protects the 3 or lesses. But by and large, I think there are some ways that this could, if you're playing this package, I think playing Zoro is fine. But if you're not, I think adding more of this kind of tempo, having just more 5 costs of play, that, you know, having the Cavendish and then, you know, 3 backup copies of it that help you just get that Dawn back at the end of each turn, I think makes a huge difference. And just also means that you can really capitalize on playing your Dofi, right? If you play this on 10, you have now a total of 10 different cards that if they stay on board, you get the extra Dawn every turn, which means that you can, you know, play Dofi, have a Dawn open, and use your leader effect on the, you know, next turn too. So I think that's important. I think Bonney is doing really good right now. I think it does, you know, have a bit of a rough matchup in Rob Lucci and Luffy at times, but you can definitely overcome it. And it's been one of my favorite, like sneaking favorite decks in this format as we've been continuing on with it. So these are both the builds. Congratulations to both the Bonney players here. All right, next up we've got Zoro. So this is jumping down a little bit in the tournament results, right? We did have of this only 4 copies of Zoro compared to the 9 for the Nami as well. But I think Zoro is doing great. The version we have right now, this is from Tech, from again the core TCG regionals that I was part of. But I think the biggest thing I wanted to kind of show off on this one is that I've had a lot of people, we went over some of the OP, or the TCG matchmaking results and their just stats for their ranked ladder. And I had a lot of people like, why, you know, is Silver's really worth the ad in this deck, right? Is this worth it? We're such an aggressive deck. We're a deck that really cares about just putting as many bodies on board, you know, using the 3-drop chopper and using everything else. And I think this kind of shows that this is really helpful. If you need to go board for some reason, being able to play this card, give something -3k and -2k till the end of your opponent's next turn really impacts a lot. You know, Dragon, I think, is default maybe a little bit better of the two. You know, being able to use this effect and then putting a Dawn underneath your Zoro leader, which means that you become a 10k and then your Zoro becomes a 7k for 8 Dawn. That's a lot of pressure from an empty board in this game. So I think that's obviously a good include there. But I do like the idea of this, and it's cool to see that it did top and do well in a regionals with that. So other than that, it's kind of like the same package we've been seeing for the animal package for Zoro. Just put as many animals as we can fit in there reasonably, and then just hope that our Shut Up and Come With Us hits a lot of good cards. The only thing I will say is that we're only playing 1 copy of Janbei. I would definitely try to sneak 2 copies of it, because it is, if you're playing against a 4 life leader, if you see this card, there's just a lot of chances you win. It's really easy to hit them down to 0, and then after you do that, you're in a really, really good spot. But I think Zoro is great. I think the first week or two, I probably hyped this deck up a little bit more than it deserved, but I do think it's really relevant right now, and it's something you have to know how you play against it and respect it too, because if you aren't playing like a really high removal black deck, they can just swarm the board very quickly and do very well with it. So this is the build here. Congratulations to Tech for their top with Zoro. And then next up, we've got Reiju, and we've got Sebastian's version of it here. We had 3 Reijus across the events top this weekend. And also in the core TCG one, I did, you know, be able to sneak a non-Vinsmoke family version of this. So just kind of like a blue and purple good stuff version of the deck. And it was really cool to see that, but still, unfortunately, I think at least unfortunately for diversity of deck building, The standard package for Reiju is still generally where it's at. So even though like at the beginning of this video where I said that Rob Lucci and like Luffy, there are some good varieties sometimes in their deck building, I think Reiju is pretty much cemented to something pretty close to this. So that just includes that we're playing like the Porsche, which was, an ad from OP07, which has been pretty strong. We add the Black Maria because we do just being able to go back up our Dawn chain is really great if we're being really aggressive with it, especially since we can play it off the Porsche, so we get that additional advantage. And because of that too, because of Black Maria, we're able to spend a turn to go way back up on our Dawn. I think Vinsmoke Judge becomes a lot more viable of a card to hit out. Generally, if you want to play this where it made sense to, it meant that you had to give up a turn to use any of your Dawn minuses to be able to go from 6 to 8. With the Black Maria, you can still play out like either the Niji or like a 2-cost Reiju or something like that, and then still be able to get enough Dawn and get it back that you can then play Judge the next turn. So I think that's helpful. I think more decks can, you can more reliably get to this card, and that helps out the deck a lot in this because of Black Maria. Though this card is not searchable right in the deck right now, so that's a little bit unfortunate. But I think Reiju's in a good spot. I do think most of the time it's kind of like there are some bad matchups for the deck, but generally you're kind of still playing with your own cards, right? If you don't see your stage, if you don't see the right copies of it, you're in a bad spot. But I also think this deck can also win no matter what, right? If you see 2 Porsche Ichiji's, most decks just lose to that, like on the spot. It's just a lot of pressure. There's no consistency for making sure that happens, but if you do make it happen, you're doing super good. So this is the build here, though, from Sebastian. Congratulations for their top with Reiju. And then we got 3 singletons. We do have the Kalgara to start off. So this is Lucas's version of it. They were able to go X1 with it in the Brazil regionals here. So being able to go X1 with this deck, I think is very impressive. I don't think I've even won 7 games with this deck. So to go 7-1 with it, I think is really impressive. We kind of know what the deck looks like because it is so involved on the Sky Island package, right? We do want to be able to see our Kalgaras more consistently. We do want to be able to get the cycle, the hits with our upper yard. And I think getting into this format, I was a little too excited for Kalgara. The first couple weeks, I was a little bit underwhelmed by Kalgara, and I think I've kind of middled out with it in the sense that I do think it can be really aggressive and it can hit its curve, and that happens probably a little bit more often than I was doom and glooming in the first week after just having some bad experiences with the deck. But I do think that it's strong. You do want to be able to run cards that hit off your life just in case that happens. So we do see like the Nami, we see some beiges, we have Omen Holy, and then we do have like Satori as well, which lets you trigger from that. These don't play off of life. These are just good cards that I was going down the line. But I think this deck has a lot of potential. It's just like a little unfortunate that there are some games, kind of like Reiju, in the fact that you do have the potential to see a lot of good cards, but that's out of your hands a lot of the time because your searches are so specific and can bottom deck the cards you really needed later in the game. So I think Kalgara is good. If I was to be to simplify it, I do think it's maybe a worse version of Reiju. Both decks kind of try to do the same thing with swarming the board, and this one's a little bit worse for that, but I think the ceiling for Kalgara can be a little bit higher than Reiju. If you just are able to chain out Kalgara and Nolan 2 turns in a row, it's the same thing as the Reiju combo or with the Vinsmoke combo with Porsche, and I think that can be very strong too. But this is a build. Congratulations to Lucas for their 7-1 with Kalgara. Next up, we've got Gecko Moria, which I wasn't expecting to talk about this leader today, but it did pop up. This was Deuce's version of it from the Core TCG regionals, and look at this deck. I don't even think this is an OP07 deck, right? This is strictly OP06 cards and early, right? We don't play Jack. We don't play any of the new cards from OP07, right? We are strictly an OP06 deck, right? Let me double check on this, right? Oh, no OP07 cards yet. Only OP06 cards, right? Which I think is actually pretty remarkable in its own way. I do know that some people, they just get to a deck and they just stay on it. They're and I think the other thing that's kind of remarkable is that because of the Star Deck 14 Luffy getting a lot of popularity in general, I've seen a lot of Moria players jump from there to there, right? The idea that it's a not as heavy removal version of Lucci, right? A lot of people went to Lucci after Sakazuki, so a lot of people from Moria went to Luffy when that deck became a little bit popular. And I'll still say that I think that Luffy is probably the better deck of the two. But in this format where Gecko Moria has been such a monster to deal with for so many decks, Moria, a leader that is consistently able to see it on curve, or have multiple copies of it with the help of being able to trash more cards with cards like Sindri and her own leader effect, as well as being able to get it back with Hogback. It can be better consistency wise, though. I'll still say that Rob Lucci has the best 8-drop Moria play in the game right now, and Luffy is a little bit better than Moria, I think, for playing cards, but you do have to be you're a little bit less consistent on finding the card and also filling up your trash with Star Deck 14 to make the card worth being played on curve. So I'm still a little bit surprised to see Gecko Moria, but I'm happy to see him after all this time, and congratulations to Deuce for their finish there. And then to finalize this video, we do have Donquixote Doflamingo, someone I haven't been talking about a lot, but I'm sure this time next month I'm going to not be able to avoid him at all with the Star Deck 14, or not 14. It's which one's blue? Is it 17? I think it's 17. Regardless, I think this deck is still very viable for this format right now. And if we didn't, it's kind of like this weird scenario, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video, because people know that Dofi's getting better later in this month, they're not playing it right now. They're going to say, you know what? End of the month, I'm a Dofi fan. I'm going to be playing it. I'll be good at it then. But until it's not as strong as it can be, I'm going to play some other decks for it. So I think this deck could be doing better in this meta right now if more people played it. But since people are waiting, in my experience, for the star decks, it's just doing all right. And you can kind of tell that when you look at the people playing it, right? Like only 40 people out of 1,000 for the core TCG, only 30 people out of 1,000 for the No Heroes one, and only 27 out of 500 for the Madrid regional. So not a lot of people are on it. So the fact that we still are able to get a top with it, I think is really impressive with it. We have still super good cards. I think Jinbei has been consistently one of the strongest cards in this deck. And again, a 4-cost that plays another 4-cost is really good with no cost. There's no cost for this, right? You don't have to discard it. It's an active and it's a 4.5k, so it's on curve like the regular power level, and it has counter. So being able to take advantage of an already broken card that you play it on 4, it's broken. Then you play it for 3, but you really only pay it for 1, right? Because you still get the 2 Dawn for the 7k attack. So this deck can obviously do a lot right now. It's very tempo oriented. If you're able to take the early board advantage with Jinbeis and Weevils, and then you're able to clean up your opponent's board with Raging Tiger or Red Rock, and then get some turns afterwards, I think and then pressure with the cards you already have on board. This deck can be very oppressive still. So obviously more consistent moving forward, but still really consistent right now. And if you want to play this deck, go for it. You don't have to wait for the star decks. It's still in a good spot. So this is Luis's version of the deck, and congratulations for their top with Dofi. But that's going to be it for us. Again, a little bit of a chunkier video. We had a lot of events that we just, we touch the surface on a lot of these decks and events and stuff. So if you guys want to see your own, draw your own results, see the deck list yourself, they're all on my website. Again, Eggman Events. You can check that out right now. And I'm just done. I'm tired. This is a lot just to put together. And but I'm happy that OP08 is out in an official capacity for the English regions, and to have a lot of events go over was a lot of fun too. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you all next time.